Campaigning has begun for Myanmar's general election. Almost 100 political parties are expected to take part in the November 8th poll. The 2015 election ended half a century of military-backed rule, and that began when the army took power in a coup in 1962. And so began a long period of economic stagnation. Resentment has grown over the years, especially among the young, and it culminated in a nationwide strike which triggered a violent crackdown by troops. The 8888 movement, well, so-called for the date it occurred, inspired Aung San Suu Kyi to establish the National League for Democracy, otherwise known as NLD. In 1989, Burma's name was changed to Myanmar, and that same year, Ms. Suu Kyi was placed under house arrest. A year later, the military government called an election. The NLD scored a resounding win, securing 80% of seats in parliament. Now, the stunned military government refused to recognize the result. 2 decades on, and polls were held in 2010. But the NLD refused to take part, arguing new laws deterred many of its members, including Ms. Suu Kyi. By then, pressure for change was building inside and outside the country. The military government released Ms. Suu Kyi days after the failed 2010 poll. In 2015, the NLD cruised to an easy victory when elections were held. So what does all this mean for this year's election? Myanmar expert Moe Thuzar joins us, and she's fellow and coordinator in Myanmar Studies Programme at ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, this is only the fourth election in about 60 years in Myanmar. So help us understand, how significant is this? Quite significant.
Hi, Glenda. Hi, Dawn. Yes, as you have provided the context, if you look at the elections since 1960, I'll use the free and fair lens. So in 1960, multi-party elections, they were actually held after a caretaker government headed by the military had restored law and order to the country and convened elections where democracy won. But then after the 1988 coup, when the military junta convened multi-party elections in 1990, they were acknowledged as free and fair largely by the international community observing it, even though the NLD was severely hampered in its participation in these elections. Despite that, it won a landslide victory, which the results were not recognized. Now, 2010, the NLD did not participate in the elections, which were also largely decried as sham and not so free and fair at all. And so we came to 2015, and it's interesting to note that the 2010 and 2015 elections were held under the auspices of the military-drafted 2008 Constitution. So there were concerns about what does it constitute to be free and fair, and of course there were concerns whether the NLD's landslide victory would be acknowledged. But there was this smooth transition of power that boded well for democratic transition in Myanmar. And so here we are in 2020 with this projected return to what does it mean to have free and fair elections. But of course, as has been the case with many countries that have gone through elections this year, the shadow of COVID-19 will be foremost, I think, in people's minds.
Mo, this election, though, comes with yet another dimension, the COVID-19 pandemic. So what challenges do you foresee in ensuring, again, free and fair elections there?
Well, as of now, the Union Election Commission has not made any announcements to the contrary about polling stations. As of now, all that we know is that the ruling party has kicked off the campaign season, so to speak. And of course, the figure 8 is a very significant number in Myanmar's political history, especially for the contemporary times. So the Union Election Commission, I guess, may announce where polling may or may not go ahead if in the situation of conflict or natural disasters. There have been conditions in the past that have prompted such announcements. But as of now, as far as I know, polling is set for the over 300 townships in the country.
So de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi, now she's appealing for a landslide victory. Do you see this happening?
I think there is quite a significant level of certainty that the National League for Democracy, the ruling party, will receive a majority and confirm its electoral legitimacy once again. But perhaps to a lesser degree of landslide, as I think there seems to be an emerging interest in the ethnic regions, mostly, to have a greater voice in how their areas are governed, as well as, I think, the need to balance this skepticism that the NLD's supermajority, the overwhelming vote for change because the NLD's time had come in 2015, there seems to be some amount of skepticism in the ethnic regions that this might translate into some kind of stronghold on power, which, of course, the NLD's platform of inclusion would want to avoid. But I think by and large, we're all looking at the NLD confirming its electoral legitimacy again. And the campaign platform that the NLD announced today indicates as such. It translates roughly to something to the effect of, let us confirm the electoral victory and true democracy.
Mo, we've seen the news reports about the testimony of the two soldiers who fled. They're being questioned now. How much impact will the Rohingya crisis have during this year's election?
Don, that's a very interesting question, because when it comes to the Rohingya issue, sentiments domestically in Myanmar are almost in inverse proportion to the kind of criticisms and the comments that we have seen and heard in the international community. So a large swathe of the population in Myanmar view Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD government as having to take on this legacy and somehow defend the atrocities that have been committed by the military in their disproportionate response to the attacks in 2017. So this latest news, I think a lot of people will be monitoring it with great interest in Myanmar. But it also has the potential, of course, to kind of confirm certain biases of say, democracy versus the military. As you know, the military still has a significant role in the country's political life up to now.
Mo, thank you very much for those insights. They're always a pleasure to speak to you. We've been speaking there to Moe Thuzar, a fellow and coordinator in the Myanmar Studies Programme at the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute.